Right, welcome everyone. This is a nice little follow-up webcast based upon the SunBurn sessions that I did for the Microsoft Tech Days, where we went over showing how to get things into the SunBurn editor and then show them on the screen, get them all light mapped on the phone. So here we're going to take a step back and we're actually going to show you how to generate models for use in SunBurn. Obviously you can't use any old model off the shelf because there's a few little prerequisites, especially if you can use them on the phone. If you can use them with the Xbox or anything else, don't have to worry about it, but this is following on from the phone session. This is waffling on a bit. Right, so here we have Blender. This is one of the latest beta of Blender at this point in time. It's version 2.56a. And here we have our default basic scene. So we're going to take this cube and we're going to go show all the way from start to beginning how to get this into the SunBurn engine. Right, so first and foremost is we're going to texture this. So I'm going to drag a nice little line over here. I'm going to switch to the UV image editor. Nice little image. And I'm going to go and create a new image, just a very basic one. Let's give this a name of cube map. Let's have a colour. I'm quite favourable to blue. Actually I prefer green, but I'm going to do blue. So ignore that, and that's it. No, for some reason it always ends up zoomed straight in. So there's our texture. Now, first thing we have to make sure we do is save our model. Now, I've got a nice little folder here, and I'm simply going to make my cube model. Now, the reason we do this is the fact that when you save things in Blender, everything is relative. So where you save your models, where you save your images, it all works out the relativity of where those are when you save them. So there I've got my model saved. I'm going to save my image. Put that in a textures folder. One of the things they say on the Blender artist forums and also in some of the other areas is that always keep your textures separate from models. Yes, it's nice to bunch them all together, but then you have trouble working together. It's more important as well when you get into SunBurn, because if you want to use different textures for on your models, then you don't want everything bound straight in together. So there's our model, and there's our image that we're going to use to wrap round our model. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually go and create our first, UV map. So we have to switch to edit mode, make sure all of the object is actually selected that we actually want to map. I could have several models in this scene to actually go and do, but I'm just doing one at a time. So I'm going to mesh, very sensitive controls in this. UV unwrap, and I'm going to use the smart projection unwrapping. Reason being is the fact that there's lots of different options here and you can play around, do what you want, but I find this one always works actually 100% of the time unless it's an extremely large complicated model. So selecting that, and that's in my UV image area there, it's show me that UV map. You notice the fact that it's not actually got my texture still there. So what I need to do now is I want it UV mapped to the texture I already had there. So that's my cube, UV mapped, and on my texture. I then need to go over to the texture tab, which for some reason you have to always get further out to get to this. There's a texture, and now I want to make sure I'm telling my model to use this image. So I'm going to select the type of image or movie. I'm going to set it as a material for the preview. This just makes things easier on the back end. I'm going to open up my texture. Notice the fact that it went straight to the folder where my model was, and coming back and going to my texture one. So it's all nicely mapped there. And down here, as I scroll down, I also want to set it to be a UV. Oops, nope, not generate, wrong one. The UV type coordinates. So it's going to nuclearly map based upon the UV coordinates here, the texture onto that. Don't ask me why, it just seems to work better, and all the other guides I've seen on this seems to indicate that. So with our texture assigned up, we need to go over to our materials tab, and a good thing to do here, and you'll see why when we get to the Blender here, is I'm going to actually rename the material I've got for this object. Now I could actually have a material set for each face or for portions of the model and others. You should have seen on some of the other SunBurn videos and done by some of the other members of the SunBurn community, where they've actually done a tunnel and they set up materials for independent sections of a tunnel. Could do that, but I'm just doing one very basic simple thing here. So I'm going to call my cube my cube material. I'll spell that right. Yep. Okay, so it's now called my cube material. Now, not absolutely needed, but I would recommend also then assign it. I mean, by setting that up, it should be assigned, but it's always good to make double sure it's there. Now, this is now how you currently have most models as you get them off the shelf to put into anywhere else. But to get them to work on the foam, we need to add a second UV mapping layer. And this is the bit that took me a while to figure out when it comes to Blender, but we'll get it in. And you'll see that here on this object data, there's this UV texture section. And you can see at the moment it's got 1. Now if I tried putting this into SunBurn right now, it'd work on the Xbox, it'd work on Windows, because it's all dynamic lighting. It wouldn't work with the light map because basically Blender has nowhere to store the actual generated data it uses for creating that light map. So what we have to do is we have to add a second UV texture. I always like to name it as well, just so I know what it is. And then we have to again sort out and unwrap the model into this second area. So I can see there's my one with my texture, and there's one my light map. This is blank. I don't need an image for that. I just need a generated coordinate layer for a light map, and SunBurn will sort out the rest. So I'll make sure I save my model, and then comes the next little caveat, is that exporting. Now with XNA generally, if anyone's used to using Blender before, we've always used this XNA FBX exporters. Lovely little script that does it to do it for XNA. This doesn't work with SunBurn at the moment. So we have to do it as a standard, traditional Autodesk FBX format. And then I'm going to drop this into my models folder. So I've got a models folder with my exported FBX, and I've got a textures folder with the textures I'm using my scene or my model. So now, if I go to my folder here, and I'm going to simply copy my models and textures, and I'm going to go and put them straight into my content project I'm using for SunBurn. You'll note I'm actually copying them straight into the folder structure. I'm not copying it into my Visual Studio Express Content Manager library. This isn't necessarily required for building because the editor does all the hard work for you and does all the mapping. You may want to do other things in here or add other textures, but for the purpose of this, we're just going to copy them straight in. Now switch over to the SunBurn editor. You can see I've actually still got it running here and there in the actual background. I don't actually have to stop it. I can leave this running all the time, do our models, add them in, test them over, make sure they're okay. And now I'm going to straight import in this model. And away it goes. It does its little magic of putting it all together. And this is actually doing Content Manager pipeline building, exactly the same as what the Content Pipeline does, and in fact even using the Content Pipeline to do it. So there it is, it's in, and as we showed in the video, I'm going to simply drag and drop this into the scene. And lo and behold, there's our cube, all properly textured up, and probably light mapped, well, light map capable I should say. If we look at our materials tab, you can see here where I call it the cube map to material. And you can see they've actually got the diffuse map texture already assigned to it. Now if we want to do this for the phone, obviously you've got to do it to then set everything to light mapped, set your lights to light mapped, the ambient. Then we'll go to our tools, we'll save all changes, relight the scene, and then save them. I note now, if I'd not done that second step of adding the second UV map, you would actually still have a black cube here, simply because it's got nowhere to actually store that generated data. And that's it. That's how to get from Blender into SunBurn. I'm going to follow this up with two other little snippet tutorials to go over some common troubleshooting issues when you don't get this kind of content. Right, well that's it from me, and I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.